Let's get to the next thing. Alex, we're moving along now on the ticker. Pressure on management, because we're going to hear from them on Monday. Mention this. The management group, to me, needs to be bold this offseason. They have to be. They've had 18 months now to gather information. They've made some pretty good moves. They've made some moves that I think are questionable about the future of this team. But to me, now we know this team wants to be competitive next year. I don't think I knew that 18 months ago when this management group took over, and the way they talked didn't sound like they wanted to be competitive this season. The moves have pointed us in a direction now where they have to be competitive next season. They've charted a course for next year with the Filip Hronek trade, the Andrei Kuzmenko re-signing. They have to win games next year. It was a disaster this year to not make the playoffs. It's a disaster times 5 in my eyes if they don't make the playoffs next year, because they've committed that much to next season. Am I putting too much into just next season?
No, I agree with you 100%. And I don't know if bold is the right word for just to sort of describe how management needs to operate. For me, it's creative.
Yeah, I was going to say creative. And you know what? At the same time, the other word I would use here is they need to impress us with some of their moves this offseason. They really need to do that.
Yeah.
If they are going to be this competitive team next season, they need to impress us with what they do.
Right, because being bold is
being bold is trading for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That was a bold move from Jim Benning.
Jim Benning was bold on many
yes,
occasions.
Yes, he was.
Right, and it just so happened to be when he had an excess of draft picks and cap space to spend like a drunken sailor. Right, so management doesn't have those resources available to them right now. They're going to have to think outside the box. They're going to have to find more hidden gems. They're going to have to have more recruitment wins. They got to find some way to get rid of cap space, man. It's not going to be easy, but boy, I'm looking at somebody like Tyler Myers and I'm like, man, you're screwed if you can't find a way to move that contract. Yeah. Like, that sucks.
Mm-hmm. I think on top
you can still
of that,
make I don't want to be over dramatic. You can still make the playoffs next season, even if you can't like sort of move that contract. But I'll tell you this, it makes it a whole hell of a lot easier if you can find a way to ship him out and be able to do something with that cap space.
I also look at it as like, we talked about the moves, creative, impressive, bold, whatever you want to call it. If they don't make the playoffs next year, it's crazy to think that within 30 months of taking this job, not even, this management group's in the hot seat.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't make the playoffs next year, they are. And listen, there are things that are out of management's control that could keep them out of the playoffs. If Thatcher Demko isn't healthy and on his game next year, I don't see this team making the playoffs.
Yep.
That's out of management's control if he can stay healthy and on his game throughout the season.
But to counter that, I still think that would be their fault, because look at Seattle. Seattle in the second year of their existence has made the playoffs with, I can't remember the exact number, but their team save percentage is like 887 or something.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, their goaltending has been barely competent the whole year. And you're telling me a second-year expansion team still found a way to make the playoffs and did it comfortably? Like, if you're a management team and your bet for making the playoffs is the only way we can get in is if we get elite goaltending, you've already failed, in my opinion.
Seattle, you brought it up. No goaltender on Seattle has a save percentage above 900 this year of the 3 goalies they've ran through. And, wow, that's crazy.
And this season should prove to you that if you're reliant on, like, you can't solely be reliant on elite goaltending, because look at what happened to Demko this year. This is what happens to elite goaltenders sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Look at the number of high-end goaltenders that Carey Price, in the prime of his career, had a season. I think it might have been the 2017-18 campaign where he was a flat 900. You're telling me arguably the best goaltender of the last generation, if he can be human for a whole season, anybody can be human for a whole season. Look at Jacob Markstrom. Vezina finalist last year, craps the bed for Calgary this season. Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh had a great start. He'd become one of Pittsburgh's most important players, but then he gets hurt, and in the last 19 games that he played, he was below 900. That's one of the reasons that Pittsburgh missed the playoffs. And before you say, oh, well, look, they're a good team. Like Pittsburgh's a good team. And because they didn't get goaltending, they didn't make the playoffs. So, you need it. Well, Pittsburgh's front office just got fired today because of that.
Yeah.
So like there are consequences for this. Calgary, there are like Brad Treliving's future is up in the air. He may not be back next season. There's a decent chance that he gets fired. So like, that's not going to fly as an excuse next season.
No. And if that's what I'm like, we could be at a very interesting point next year, 1 year from today, if the Canucks do not make the playoffs, because they've committed some of their future. In the 18 months that this management group has been here, they've committed some of their future to being competitive next season already. They've made that bet. They made that bet when they traded for Hronek. Because, listen, Hronek's going to be good next year, and then he needs a contract after that, right? He's only got 1 more year. You committed to Kuzmenko. He's probably going to be fine next year, too. He's going to score goals for you. Probably score goals for you after that. But, like, you're betting on those guys being good in those 2 years that you gave up assets.
Team success.
Yeah,
like for those bets to pay off, right? Because somebody like Kuzmenko, great player, but he's a UFA in 2 years, so you need to win something in that window. Otherwise, it's like
a pointless contract. Yeah,
right. So again, that's not to say that the path that management has chosen is destined to fail, because there are avenues for them to make this work, be successful.
Yep.
But this is a high stakes position, and next season matters a lot.
It is. And like, to me, this team will not miss the playoffs if Thatcher Demko is on his game. But goaltending, to me, is the hardest thing to bet on in hockey. So we'll have to see what happens.
Another example, look at Freddie Anderson in Carolina, right? Again, same sort of thing. I can't remember if he was I don't think he was a Vezina finalist, but he was top 5 goalie last year. Across the board, had an outstanding season. And this year he was hurt, and I think he had a 904 save percentage this season. Like, this happens to really good goaltenders.
Yeah, 4th in Vezina voting last year.
There you go.
And you fall off to a 903 this season.
And that's the difference, right? Like,
that's the other thing. He was an 895 the year before being 4th in the Vezina voting. It's not like he built up to that Vezina thing, man. Like,
goaltenders are so hard to. I mean,
but it's also the most important thing the Canucks are betting on for next year. They know what they have with their forward group. They know what they have to do to their defense group. They are going to make changes to the defense core. They're not changing the goalie. They're bringing back Thatcher Demko next year, and they need him to be good. There's so much pressure on him.
There's pressure on whoever's the backup.
Yeah, that too.
Like, that's important, especially if you look at Demko. Even down the stretch here, we saw him play excellent, and then as the workload became a lot, there were a couple slips, and then they gave him a little bit of rest, and then it was like, all right, he got back to that form. You're not going to be able to ride him for 65 starts.
Yeah,
we saw him even last season start to break down a little bit, got hurt at the end of last season. Like, in today's NHL, you can't ride your starter into the ground. You need a backup who can step up and give you really competent play. I'm optimistic that Spencer Martin can bounce back. So, he's an option, whether it's him, whether it's Seelovs, whether it's, you find somebody else. But, you're going to need that. It's not just on Demko. But, yeah, I mean, goaltending is going to be essential for next year. And like you said, if they get it, then all of a sudden you're in a much stronger position to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's the biggest deciding factor next year for me, if they make the playoffs or not. It's, it's not, is Pettersson going to take another step? Is JT Miller going to play defense?
Well, they also do need the blue line
for sure
and the team's defensive form as a whole to be what it has been in the second half as opposed to the first half, because even when it struggled in the first half, like, let's be honest, the defense was a tire fire. And I'm not talking just the blue line. The amount of backdoor plays that they allowed, cross seams, the penalty kill being disastrous again.
We could see it from the press box. Like, they're going to pass it to this guy in the slot who has this. You could see, we were watching it happen.
All the turnovers that led to on-man rushes against, like, it was, you could have had Dominic Hasek, the prime version of Hasek in net. And he wouldn't have been able to make up for all of those defensive flaws. So that's an important part of the equation too. And that's where they need to get much better play from the blue line.